Sure, it refreshes there first, and I can see it. It counts down, right? Are we going live? Hello, everybody. This is Randy Ross. I'm here today with Jacob Engels. And Jacob, once again, we're going to talk about politics. And today we're going to talk specifically about the special election for State House 44. What are your, just real quickly before I have a couple of stats I want to give everybody, but real quickly before we get into it, what are your thoughts on that one?
It's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's a little bit like District 5. It's kind of the City of Orlando race. It's kind of coming into those spaces. I just want to give everybody some background real quickly, especially if you don't live here in Orlando. This seat is, I primarily would suggest it's a West Orange County seat. I'll just real quickly suggest it's over in, it goes all the way to Apopka. It includes Dr. Phillips, Bay Hill, Windermere, parts of Winter Garden. It's very interesting, you know, the prior, our State House Representative, Eric Osnagel, won this actually in a special election in 2014. He was recently appointed by our governor to be the judge in the 5th District Court of Appeals. That was on May 8th, so he resigned on May 18th. We have a primary election that's going to be coming up in this race on August 15th, and the special election on October 10th. That's the background. Real quickly, this race, this seat, or this area has about 157,000 people in it. But this is interesting because I called Chadwick Hardy today, the vice chairman of the Republican Party. He was giving me this is like a super performing district. Like, we're talking like way up there. Like in the last election, 111,000 people actually registered to vote. It was like 90-something thousand actually voted in there. That's not normal in political districts.
No, and this district in particular, District 44, is really the key to the speakership.
Sure.
So it's a safe Republican.
Why is that? Why is that? Why is that?
Because
Chadwick said the same thing.
It is one of the most solid and safe Republican districts in the whole state.
Gotcha.
So we've got some up in Jacksonville, a few maybe out in Tampa, and some down in South Florida because of the Cuban vote that really hold well for the Republican Party. And District 44 in Central Florida is the penultimate. I mean, if you win District 44, you, as a Republican, are not going to be defeated by a Democrat, barring a sex scandal or something like that.
And those have come to Orange County before, haven't they?
Many, many times.
Real quickly, the breakdown demographically is about 74% white, about 8% black. I was interested, about 10% Asian. I didn't realize it had such a large Asian population out in that area. The breakdown of the registered 112,000 or so voters. Real quickly, 35,000 are Democrats, 42,000 Republicans, and then 34,000 equal other. And, you know, one of the things I was also talking with Chadwick about is that typically MPAs tend to skew to the right. So obviously this no party affiliation sector, or this other sector, libertarians, et cetera, that are part of that number will be something the candidates running for this seat will have to take a look at.
Absolutely. District 44 is very similar in that regard with the center-right independents to Renee Placencia's current district out there in 50 with East Orange, Avalon Park, Waterford Lakes,
right,
and everything else. So it is definitely a center-right district, which is why Democrats have not performed well there at all ever in recent memory. So the calculus here is whoever gets through the Republican primary will win the general, and from there it's a safe seat until they are termed out, which is why it is such a important seat for people who are seeking speakership, because they don't have to think about the tough re-election battle each year. They know, again, barring a sex scandal, corruption, or something like that, that they will be re-elected, which allows them to really take the banner of the party and make the argument that they should be speaker.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to go through, and then we're going to break down each candidate. I believe there's still 5 that have qualified, 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans. Just real quickly, just to give people a history, there has been a special election in this district, as I mentioned before. It was, you know, the primary was between Osnagel and Vicki Bell, who at the time was on school board. He blew her away in that primary. I think he got like 4,000 votes. Vicky Bell got 700. So that was an indication of where that was
rough.
going to go. But back there in 2014, which is now 3 years ago, the total number of votes cast in that special election, roughly 10% of the total registered number of people that could vote, 9,400 people. Icnuggle got 6,900. There was a Democrat that ran against him, Sean Raja, that got 2,500. So are we looking, you think, Jacob, also at about 10% on the special election this time, or what are your thoughts?
Possibly maybe a little more because we're coming off the hot 2016 election cycle. There's great energy on the Republican side to send the message that President Trump's win was not a fluke. Same thing with the Democrats.
Right.
They are very desperate to try and cut into some of these GOP seats like they tried in South Carolina and Georgia. This one is not for them, however. It will be wasted money, and whatever candidate ends up being the Democratic nominee is more of a patsy candidate than anything
Well, that kind of
else.
leads me into, I did seek an opinion from both the Republican Party of Orange County as well as the Democrat Party, and I'm going to read both of those, and then we're going to get into candidates. But before I forget, I want to make sure everybody realizes this is a 2-year seat, and it pays a whopping $29,900 something dollars, $697 or something like that a year. They will probably have to raise literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to not only get reelected, but to in this election process. So it's very interesting, and you can only have 4 2-year terms on it. So here's a statement from Chadwick Hardy, the vice chair of the Republican Party. It is good to have great community leaders that are qualified to run. Whoever wins is set up to potentially make a run at House Speaker, and that's exciting. So that's what his response was. Then I also wanted to, there is a Democrat in the race, I did reach out to Wes, and Wes Hodge, chairman of the Orange County Democratic Party, and thank you for responding. His response was, House District 44, much like the rest of Orange County, is trending Democrat as we move forward. The Orange County Democratic Party is glad our voters will have a clear choice in October, and they will be able to vote for a candidate who is willing to represent their ideas in Tallahassee. So that's his opinion. Well, I think the number...
Bullcrap.
Well, I don't think the numbers go towards that, but it's nice to dream, I think, in that case. But I did appreciate Wes giving us his feedback.
I think Chadwick is pretty spot on with his analysis. Chadwick is someone who has toyed with running for office the past couple of years. He's a very successful businessman. He makes payroll. He knows...
Yeah, I think he has like 600 employees, some crazy number, hundreds of employees.
An insane amount. He really knows what it takes to be someone that supports other people.
Sure.
And puts service before self. So I really appreciate his comments. He's absolutely right about House Speaker. Now, for Mr. Hodge, I appreciate the energy. I appreciate the positivity and the hopefulness of that statement, but this district is as about likely to go Democrat as Darren Soto's seat is to go Republican.
That's a fair assessment.
It's a pipe dream, and Wes actually has been doing a pretty good job with Democrats.
Yeah, I actually have seen him engage on some things, and he seems to be relatively central, not trying to create any challenges. He's pretty normal. I'll say, hey, Sean McQuaid, hey, Dr. Goodwin, I see you on there.
The Trump doc.
The Trump doc, right. And just real quickly, you have to be 21 years old to actually run in this race. They all are. You have to have lived in Florida for 2 years, and you must live in the district that you're actually going to serve. Okay, so here we're going to start with the Democrat, and then we'll just go through each one of the Republicans. I had to do some research on Paul Chandler because I've never heard of him before. That doesn't mean anything. Of course, as a registered Republican, but more importantly, I would have thought I would have saw something on some political page or something. I could not find an actual candidate page. So tell me, what do we know about Paul Chandler?
As far as I know from the information that's out there, Mr. Chandler does healthcare, IT consulting. My mom, who's actually with us right over there, does the same thing. It's actually an emerging market, and this is the process of taking medical records and computerizing them and providing doctors with the knowledge to run apps that they can say, you're Randy Ross, you have flu symptoms, you are 5'10", weigh 140 pounds. They enter that into an app, and it spits out the correct dose of medication and otherwise. So it's an emerging market. He has a good understanding of business and entrepreneurialism. But I would argue that Chandler is, with that Democrat attached to him, he's just not going to win this district.
I will say this, I did take a look at his campaign finance reports, and I didn't really see a lot of activity there. And For the record, he is the president and chairman of Ohana Healthcare. Apparently has offices down in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, and you are correct about the rest of it. Just at this stage, they just don't know enough about him, and I think that's dangerous when you're in, especially in a special election. The people that come out for a special election, folks, they are coming to vote for a person, or they're going to send their vote in for a person because they've either been touched by them, know them, or something. They're not going out to vote for anything else but this specific item, which can be very dangerous if you have no name recognition. Okay, so we do have a number of Republicans. I've kind of put them in the order of which I'm thinking they're going to be in their competitive nature for that qualified. Usha is Jane, I believe is how you say the last name. She's a doctor and a former candidate for a county commission, I believe, wasn't it? How did she do in that race? Do you recall?
Dr. Jane did not do very well in the last race, but that's not to say that she won't do well in this race.
She lives out in Dr. Phillips' area,
She lives out in Dr. Phillips' area, and someone like an Abraham Lincoln ran a lot of times before he won. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen for Dr. Jane. It's exciting for me, though, to see a Muslim individual who is running for office now twice as a Republican. It kind of defeats the narrative that Republicans are anti-Muslim. We're not anti-Muslim. We are anti-radical extremists of any type. So her candidacy is interesting. I wish, though, that she had picked another race or started with a school board or soil and water, zoning and planning commission, any number of things, and built those relationships, because she would be a great standard bearer for the Republican Party in the Trump era, but not this time.
Again, very difficult to find too much information unless she was mentioned in an article as having been qualified regarding any type of campaign collateral, web page, Facebook presence. I didn't see anything on her. Move on to Bruno Porti. How do you say his last name? I'll spell it because I don't want to tear it up. It's Portiliatti. He is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer at Excellence, ALF. A quick review of his Facebook page suggests he's relatively young. I mean, he is. He looks like he just got married. I don't know if he's a contender so far, but I did go take a look at his Facebook page, and it's a professional, presence and things like that. So maybe this is his entree into politics. But again, that last name alone is difficult to pronounce, so I think he's going to have to find a way to. But then again, so is Bobby Olszewski, who we're going to talk about in a second. He did it pretty well in the last bid for county commission. So let's just go ahead and move past that, because there's really only two real contenders in this race.
New Street and Olszewski.
Let's just real quickly talk each one individually. Absolutely. We're going to talk about Bobby O last, because Bobby got in the race first before John Newstreet. But when John got in the race, it just exploded. I mean, I was really shocked. I couldn't believe how many people just really got on the bandwagon almost immediately. And at some point, I wanted you to get into that conversation about why this competition between John Newstreet and Bobby Olszewski. But one thing I noticed on John Newstreet's Facebook page is he just got the endorsement of the West Orange Political Alliance right out of the bat. What are your thoughts about Mr. Newstreet?
Well, if we're looking at Mr. Newstreet's record, who he is as an individual, what he represents, Newstreet, grew up in a household where he had a lot of adoptive siblings, and we're talking 10 people sharing one bathroom. And that's something that speaks to me, because when I was growing up with my grandparents, they decided to foster and adopt children. So that's something I connect with. He then went to UCF and led the College Republicans and founded a conservative students organization back when this was not a cool thing. This was not an easy thing. And Newstreet is one of those good government guys, and not someone who has been involved in government his whole life or run for office many times, numerous times. He's one of those that are in the background that are keeping someone like a Marco Rubio or a Mel Martinez in order. He worked as aides to both of them. And he doesn't embody the general idea that people get with someone who goes to Washington or works for a politician that does business in Washington. He didn't compromise his ethics or morals, and I think a lot of that is tied to his time in the Coast Guard and understanding service before self.
Okay.
I will say about Newstreet that political office has never really been a goal for him, but a lot of people kind of grabbed him by the ear and said, John, you should take a shot at this race.
Sure.
And he was hesitant. He really, does not like the idea of being a politician, but he looked at the race, he looked at the numbers, and he talked with his family, and he said, you know what? If there's any time for me to take a shot at this, it's now. I'm going to give it 110%. And he has spent a lot of time building relationships in Republican circles and in politics. And that's why we see him coming out of the gate with almost $80,000 in the first 30 days.
That's amazing. Let's transition now to Bobby Olszewski, because interestingly enough, Bobby got in this race, I believe, back in April of this year, and as a Republican, has a pretty good following. And there must be, for all these establishment Republicans, all these people have so quickly shifted their attention towards New Street. We have to eventually get into a conversation of why would they think they can beat Bobby Olszewski. But real quickly, Bobby is a new father. He used to be a Winter Garden commissioner who resigned to run for Orange County Commission. In 2016, he narrowly lost, I think it was 5 points or something like that, narrowly lost to Betsy Vanderlei. And at that point, and that's where we can go into the conversation and really start getting into what might be some of the issues, because at that point is when we saw Commissioner Scott Boyd, Orange County Commissioner Scott Boyd, I think even behind the scenes, Pete Clark and his wife, and Commissioner Pete Clark and his wife, and others really got behind Betsy Vanderlei because they had some serious issues, obviously, and made them very public against Bobby Olszewski. So in a nutshell, and I'm going to read a statement that Commissioner Boyd put on his Facebook page in a minute, but in a nutshell, what's going on here, and why is this race heating up in such a way that literally is pitting Bobby Olszewski against a relatively newcomer? You've been in New Street. What's causing that? Why that push?
Well, anyone who has followed East Orlando Post, which is now CentralFloridaPost.com, knows that I was no fan of Betsy Vanderlei. I published some excoriating, very, very rough articles about her in that commission race with Mr. Olszewski. So,
were you pro Olszewski, or were you just...
I wasn't necessarily pro Olszewski, but I did not like some of the things that I saw from Betsy Vanderlei, then a candidate, now a commissioner. So I want people to know that when I'm breaking down Bobby.
Okay.
This is not an anti-Bobby thing. This is just a well-formed opinion based on talking to people on how they feel about Bobby.
Okay.
Bobby is a very big personality. He's a very bold and a little brash. So for a political campaign, that has positives and negatives. For volunteers, for people who are supporting your campaign, it's good to have a hype man. It's good to have someone who's excited and dedicated and really zeroed in on winning the campaign.
Right. For
donors, for volunteers, and for supporters, it is sometimes a little rough because he is very, very aggressive. He's calling you every day. He's texting you. He's staying on top of it, and maybe a little more so than he should to give people their space. The other thing with Bobby is we look at what he says in his campaign material, and Mr. Olszewski, his daughter's name is Reagan, I believe.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's...
That's like the Randolphs have one. Their daughter's name is
Hillary.
Hillary. It's like, okay.
We'll forgive Scott and Suzanne for that. But Mr. Olszewski, in his campaign material and otherwise, says all the things that Republicans want to hear. Less government, limited government, ethics, morals, transparency, spending your tax dollars wisely. But he's got some serious issues with the Metro Plan board.
Okay, let's talk about that, because I saw the article.
Chair Bobby.
He didn't attend for apparently. Let's just real quick. Scott Boyd mentioned that, so let me just go through that. And it said there's 2 different Facebook posts, and neither one are very complimentary towards Bobby Olszewski. The first one: will the former Winter Garden Commissioner and failed Orange County Commission candidate, now House District 4 candidate, disclose his finance report? In the Orange County Commission election, he ran all of the expenses through a personal credit card. Last I checked, 1.5 miles in Sky Miles for every dollar spent would be a nice bonus for the candidate. Is that true? Do we know if that's a true statement or not? I'm assuming the commissioner wouldn't put out there if it wasn't true.
Everyone can go on the Orange County Supervisor of Elections website and look at those reports. Mr. Olszewski.
But is it bad? Is that wrong? I mean, maybe you know more about it than I do, but he's got to pay for them some way. So if he's paying for it with a credit card and there is some benefit to it, is he just smart, or is it morally and ethically wrong?
Well, I think that kind of crosses the line. Your donors give you money to spend on the campaign, which technically he did. They don't give you money, though, to spend it on your card to get the points and to get the benefits. Gotcha. That's kind of an unfair way to do things,
sure.
I think, for any candidate. It's
sure.
not about Bobby Olszewski.
I've never even heard of a candidate doing things like that before, so probably he's not the only one.
It's a little unusual. I think the people who do that, maybe they're thinking, I'll just pay for it right now, quicker than getting the reimbursement from the campaign or putting it through the campaign. I don't really know the motivation behind that. What I will say about Scott Boyd, again, like Betsy Vanderlei, I have not been the biggest fan of Scott
sure.
Boyd. I actually think Rick Singh is doing things very well as property appraiser. But what Scott Boyd says about those things may be a little bit hyperbolic, but there's truth in it.
Well, the interesting thing about it is first of all, I've known Commissioner Boyd for a while. I am a fan of his for the most part. I was disappointed to hear he wasn't going to run for mayor, but more importantly, when we did Walk a Mile in Our Shoes for Harbor House, he was one of the first people that got in heels and walked to support that and did that relatively easily. So I've never seen him be negative on Facebook like this, not at this level. And here's what he posted either yesterday or the day before. It said, "The only thing this guy stands for is himself. I personally picked up his slack to the tune of nearly $5,000 for a couple of back-to-school events he failed to provide for. Now he wants $500,000 of our tax dollars to start a bogus private felony rehab program for a community he couldn't even pull together a few hundred backpacks for." So talk to me about this, because you've done a story over this whole Apopka connection with the mayor, and this is really, I think, somewhat controversial in and of itself. And I've talked to Bobby behind the scenes, and obviously, and in fairness to Bobby, I mean, he did want to make a statement on the show today, but he does have the opposite feeling about all of these allegations.
Sure.
And with that said, that apparently there was a contract awarded for a for-profit business. How did that happen in Apopka, connected to Mayor? What is the Apopka mayor's
Gilsheimer.
name? Gilsheimer, which I know you're not a fan of him either. But what's going on there, and how does it play into this right now?
So what you have, and why it's relevant to the special election in House District 44, is you have the mayor of Apopka,
who's up for re-election.
Who's up for
going to be running
re-election.
against Commissioner Brian Nelson, who's leaving his county commission seat to run, right?
Who forms a for-profit company with Mr. Olszewski, with another individual, Deveron Gibbons, out of St. Petersburg.
Can we just right there say, you said with him. When I talked to Bobby, I got the impression he was asked to write the proposal. When you say with him, was he on the board of directors? What was he? Okay.
Bobby was intimately involved with that. And
what does that mean, intimately involved?
He was involved in the planning of it. He was involved in determining how many shares were going to be granted in terms of stock. I mean, this is a for-profit company that was seeking taxpayer funds to help felon rehabilitation. And when I talked to Mayor Kilch,
which in and of itself is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Okay.
It's actually a great thing to be doing. But that is a non-profit angle. They formed a for-profit company, and when I talked to Mayor Kilsheimer about this, Mayor Kilsheimer told me plainly on the phone, it's the American way. I can make money however I want to make money. And that's how they viewed that, because they look at the $500,000.
Jennifer Jecker just joined. Hey, Jennifer, how you doing, Jennifer?
They look at the $500,000 that they were going to get in state money from Randolph Bracey, who interestingly enough showed up at a New Street fundraiser. But
that is really interesting to me.
Randolph put the request in for $500,000 with State Representative Camilla Brown, I believe, out of that area. And that $500,000 was the beginning. That was the first year. But when I talked,
and what was that? How much of that money went towards that program? The $500,000, and I didn't even know. Maybe this is, again, I didn't realize that for-profit companies could write a grant necessarily and get 500 grand from the state of Florida. So if you're out there and you need some money, Beverly Burgess, get ready to write a grant for that one. But how does that work?
Well, if you look at the request, they put in a request for $500,000, and in that request they detailed how they were going to spend that $500,000. And of that $500,000, 80 to 90% of it was to be spent on consulting and executive fees, and only 10 to 15% was to be spent on actual felon rehabilitation, helping them get jobs, helping them make sure they're keeping up with their probation officers and otherwise.
Is that abnormal, though, for a startup business, basically, to the first year have a lot of administrative costs and then maybe in time move into having other costs?
Maybe when you're playing with private money, but when you're playing with taxpayer money, I think you have an obligation to the people who you're taking the money from, which are taxpayers from all around the state, to not be running a Susan G. Komen style scam that takes 93% of the money out to executive costs before they even research anything. So with that, you had an issue. This is public money, and Mayor Kilsheimer made it very clear to me that it was about personal gain and financial benefit. He was not ashamed of that, and I don't necessarily knock him. If you can get it, take it.
Sure.
But does that mean it's ethical or moral?
Do we know
really.
Was out of that 500,000 was? I guess we still refer to him once a commissioner, always Commissioner Oshesky. Was he paid out of that money? Do we know that that's where that money came, or was that just some
as it stands
effort he did to just try to help out?
As it stands, after we did the story, I don't think the status of that $500,000 has yet been determined. It's not been dispersed.
Oh, so they never got the money.
They never got the money, but that's the thing that voters need to look at. How many projects like that are going through the state government each year where nobody reports on it and the money just gets sent out? $500,000 here, there, everywhere could be a lot at the end of the day. And when Mayor Kilsheimer explained it to me, he said it was about personal financial benefit, and he said we wanted to take it statewide if it worked in the first year. And if they took it statewide based on the per pupil spending, that they were going to assign $5,000 per person each year to that program that they were running, they would have stood to gain hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money each year. And Mr. Olszewski is on the sunbiz.org paperwork. He says...
As what? As what is his role on the Sunbiz paperwork?
As one of the managers,
officers?
Partners, officers, however they determine that. But he was all over the paperwork. He was all over the paperwork with shares. And if you look at it, and this is how we know it's a scam. And again, it's not about Bobby. It's not about Mayor Kilsheimer. It's not about Devron Gibbons. It's about the process.
To some extent it is. I mean, if you're going to bring up their names,
it is about them because they're involved in it.
Right.
But if we're letting our government be run this way, it's really not about them, because they're just taking advantage of the situation that they find themselves in. And they were issuing stock options. They were
even before the money was dispersed.
Well, you have to notate that in the paperwork.
Okay.
So it said there were stock options, and it said that they were all involved in this together. And at the end of the day, when you're taking taxpayer money, $500,000, that's not a small number.
Right.
And almost 90% of it is going towards consulting and other fees. One could only imagine who would be benefiting from those consulting and other fees. And that's where the problem lies, is this isn't just, oh, we had an idea. Joe had this idea in 2009. He couldn't get the money together privately for it over the past 6-7 years, and he saw an opportunity to get the public money, and Bobby was right there with him. I don't know why.
But I've written RFB responses before that are not my personal ones, and I take the information that the client provides to me, I plug that into, just like Beverly Burgess does, I'm sure she writes her grants. So if Bobby was employed or hired as a contractor, I do have an issue with his name being on the paperwork. That to me kind of takes it away just a little bit. But if he was being employed to write, develop, and create this, is it his responsibility to be responsible for the content that they included in there? And I know the answer is yes, because he has his name on it. But in all fairness, if he'd have been writing it, and he wasn't part of the organization, it would have been fair to assume that he doesn't have to have that level of connection.
I think you're right, and I think that is he responsible in an overall sense? If he was just writing the paperwork, I would say no. But the fact that he is not a political novice, he's not a person who doesn't understand politics or the implications of what these requests mean or what it means to be a steward of taxpayer money, all of that kind of tells a person you kind of know what's going on.
All right, how did this
More
story
so
break?
than any
Out of
other
curiosity,
person.
did you break this story or did you find out about it? I mean, let's be honest, if no one in the media had found out about this, would we have ever even known? I mean,
there are Richard Corcoran, the Speaker of the House right now. I don't agree with his cutting Film Florida and the film incentives and some of the tourist incentives.
Right.
But I do agree with his stance of weeding out government waste. And this is something that is wasteful. And
well, how did we find out about this?
Well,
did he bring it out or did you bring it out? I mean, where was that initial story?
Yeah, I was made aware of it, and somebody sent me the paperwork. And, you know, a lot of times I get tips, and they say, this is the best story you're ever going to write.
I get some crazy tips. I don't know how you get some of the stories. You must have, like, little people all over the place that send you tweets and texts and everything else.
My birds are everywhere.
You do. You have a lot of birds.
But, you know, a lot of times I
have a lot of alligators. You have a lot of birds.
I get a lot of concepts like this, and 90% of the time I read through it and I research it and I find out this is somebody trying to exact political revenge on another person I'm not really interested in.
Right.
But when I looked at it and I saw it right there on the paperwork, clear as day, all this information, and the fact that on their own paperwork, Olszewski, Kilsheimer, Gibbons, all admitted that they had no experience in felon rehabilitation, that they did not contact a consultant who had experience in felon rehabilitation, that they did not work with anybody.
How did they get so far down the road of almost getting this approved with having no experience to do that? I mean, who would eventually have signed off on this and dispersed the money?
That's the interesting thing for people watching right now. Randolph Bracey, State Senator Randolph Bracey, as Mayor Kilsheimer claims, he ran into him for 5...
He would have been the one that would eventually...
Well, he put in the funding request, him and Camilla Brown. So Mayor Kilsheimer claims to me on telephone that he just bumped into Randolph Bracey at an event and talked to him about the idea, and then a couple weeks later he just got the funding request and it was all off and getting started and going through the legislature, which again, bull crap. You two are politicians. You know what's going on. No politician is going to put his skin on the line, put his neck on the line for another politician just based off 5 minutes. I want to rehabilitate felons.
Sure.
Here's $500,000.
To break down the political party affiliation, not that this is a partisan issue that we're discussing, because we're going to go back and talk about this in bigger grand scheme of things, but Joe, Mayor Kilsheimer is a Democrat, right? Randolph Bracey is a Democrat.
Yep.
Camilla
Democrat
is a Democrat. Then we have Bobby is a Republican, and based on the fact that Bracey was at the New Street fundraiser as a Republican, it makes you wonder. It seems kind of dirty all the way around, no matter who's involved in it. I mean, it just seems a little strange. But I got to be honest with you. In fairness to this, the backstory of doing the research on this, I have talked to a number of elected officials, none of which I'm going to mention here. By the way, Melissa Fowler, she says, Bobby O is about what's best for Bobby. Look at the company he keeps. And I'll be honest with you, I've always had a good relationship with Bobby Olszewski. I've seen him out with his mom and his wife, and he works very hard. When we were working on the Trump campaign, when Melissa McGee was running for her position a while back, he was always out there sign waving, very aggressive. You cannot take away the work that he does. It's very similar to Regina Hill in that way.
Anyone who says or denigrates Bobby for being in the arena is fake news. I mean, that's a term we use a lot, but you have to respect anyone who gets in the arena.
And but he works hard. I do believe that. I was
worker.
surprised to see this year-long gap of not going to the Metro Plan meetings. I was surprised to see him actually leave the Winter Garden Commission seat so quickly to jump into the race for county commissioner. It makes you wonder if that was the plan all along.
There are some issues, and people that I've talked to about Bobby and my own experiences with Bobby, there is, what's the famous Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So we've got the nice Bobby who's over here, who's supportive, who's aggressive, the Bobby that we see doing good things, sign waving, being supportive of local causes. But then we have evil Bobby over here, and kind of like our own, good and evil on our own shoulders. Everyone experiences it. We have this side of Bobby who shows up to the Metro Plan meetings enough to not get kicked off the board, but no more than that. A political calculation of spending time at a certain place. So those are the issues we see. And again, I like Bobby. I've spent time with Bobby. I was not very nice to his opponent in the commission race, which a lot of people were on me about, saying, oh, why are you being so mean to Betsy Vanderlei? And she had issues of her own, but Bobby also has issues, and that's the thing. This is not a anti-Bobby thing. This is...
Well, we saw some of that hostility come out in the county commission race, but nothing like what I'm seeing this time around. There are some people, for lack of a better phrase, that are hell-bent on making sure that he doesn't raise as much money as they do, that he doesn't have the connections, and
they are dead wrong in that, because if they look at Bobby's record for the Winter Garden Commission race, he got out there and knocked doors like no tomorrow. He was boots on the ground.
When I spoke to him today, he was going out to walk and talk.
And that's what makes Bobby dangerous. But it goes back to the point. The good of Bobby is also the bad of Bobby. The energy, the boldness, the willingness to push the limit also comes out on the other end. So, again, I like Bobby. I respect Bobby. I think he did some good things over there in Winter Garden. But what he needs to do to dispel the issues that people are seeing or may have with him is he needs to go through and say, hey, all these people that have endorsed me, all these people that are supporting me, we're sending out an open letter to voters. We are still on Team Olszewski, because I've heard from a couple of sources that 3 or 4 very big people on that list are not very happy with having endorsed Bobby.
I can confirm that I spoke to a couple of people who are regretting that endorsement.
He's got to reaffirm, and this is not Jacob, the journalist, talking to you. This is me thinking political strategy. For him to come out and have a letter reaffirming that support, and people saying, I was on Team Olszewski, I am on Team Olszewski or death in District 44, is important to him, because it takes away a lot of the issues that he has. Also, he needs to firmly come out against this scheme that Mayor Kilsheimer roped him into, and say, you know what, the more I look at this and the more I realize what was going on and how this was done, I don't like it. I was brought in to handle the business end of it as a master's in business, and I think he does some professor stuff sometimes. I was brought in to say, hey, if you guys are going to do this, here's how you do it. Not that I agree with it, disagree with it. If he was truly a consultant in that and didn't have any stock ownership, he needs to come out and say, Mayor Kilsheimer, you need to tell everyone that that was the wrong choice, that was the wrong idea, and you don't intend to do it with taxpayer money. You've found private money to do it. And I think Corcoran, who is firmly behind Bobby, from what I've heard, should demand that of his local lieutenant. Because if not, all of Corcoran's support of taking away Film Florida and cutting government waste is kind of hypocritical. You have to apply it equally across the board.
Well, I think it's all great points. It's interesting, because now what you're really getting into is, you and I know that after you get past the first couple of hundred people that know anything about politics in this town, That's where the gossip stops. That's where the real talk stops. Unless it's on Channel 9 and, Lori Brown is chasing Mayor Pisano. I had to get that in, Mayor Pisano, off the back porch trying to find out why
Lydia Pisano should run for mayor of Orange County. She is one of the best elected officials we have. Belle Isle has gotten a bad rap.
Oh, my gosh.
She has done such a good job over there. She is what a true public servant should be. She's in the community. She's out there. She's talking to people. And people unfairly criticize her, and I think
it's because she does so much work.
She does so much. They don't like
think about
that.
all the people we have, not to get on a tangent, that are in elected office. Even Commissioner Boyd would be one of those folks that you never hear anything from. Nothing way up here, nothing way down here. You just hear nothing, And Mayor Pisano will put together an Easter parade, and all of a sudden they want to have an investigation of how much the Easter eggs cost, or all these different things. So I feel for you there. I talk to her, sometimes twice a day, so I get that backstory on understanding how frustrating it can be.
That's more so Channel 9. Channel 9 has got...
They got to have a story every day. They bleed. They got to bleed for the story every day.
Has got some serious issues in that newsroom. Anthony Colarossi, the lead producer there, I was covering the mayoral race between Paul Paulson and Buddy Dyer a couple of years ago, and Mr. Paulson invited me to document that debate at WFTV. And Colarossi had been very adamant about me interviewing when I broke the Jeff Ash's story that he was on Ashley Madison. And I had a lot of people tell me Channel 9 is not good. You should not put yourself in that situation with them. And it's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ambushing going on. And so I didn't do that. Fast forward to the mayoral election, and I get into a WFTV, and Colarossi in front of Mayor Dyer, Mr. Paulson, Dyer's aide, and a few other people, gets up in my face and says, "This is my effing story. This is my news. You need to go out in the parking lot. You need to leave." And he's yelling, and he's yelling, and he's yelling. And
we saw how that worked over in the tax collector's race in Seminole County. That's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea. And Mr. Colarossi, reeked of Four Roses. It was horrible. But to each their own.
I've seen that before. What is that? Wine or what is that? Beer?
It's cheap whiskey. I
think.
Cheap
whiskey. All right.
Blended whiskey, but. Anyways, fast forwarding, Mayor Pisano should not worry about attacks from WFTV or Channel 9, because if anybody in this town is looking to create a story, it's always them.
Tamal Saska just joined us. He used to live here. Everybody, I'm with Jacob Engels. Jacob is the founder of the Central Florida Post. He's broke a lot of local stories that I find just curious that, someone with relatively new to politics, although when I listen to your history, you've actually been doing it a very long time, just relatively new to politics, but, your voice is one that people either worry about or condemn, and that means that you're doing something right. Otherwise, they wouldn't care, right? And so we're interviewing him today and talking about the special election in the Florida House that the governor has ordered, the seat the district number 44, which is basically West Orange County. Melissa Fowler followed up with something, and I don't know if it's a clarification. She says Camilla Brown was the sole sponsor. She's our rep in Apopka and introduced several bills on behalf of Apopka and Joe. Does that sound accurate?
She was the House part, and Senator Bracey was the Senate.
So there was a collaboration on their side. The sad thing about that story, if you will, or that situation is that is a good idea, but the way people are trying to profit from it makes me wonder why Mayor Chrisheimer or Olszewski or somebody else didn't go to somebody else that has some business experience and say, listen, I can't get into this because it's political, but I think you could create a business. And guess what? If down the road he wanted to, and I'm sure that happens all the time, if you wanted to become a person that helps to work in that business after you're out of elected office, or if you want to be a lobbyist to go help get more funds for something like that in the future, I don't think that would be ethically
it's the American way, and you can make money how you see fit. Doesn't mean it's ethical or moral. And I think Camilla Brown and Senator Bracey, given the demographics of their district, were probably approached with this idea and thought, well...
And those demographics basically would be Paramore all the way to and including Apopka, correct?
So they're sitting there saying, this is a great idea. This is an issue that is directly affecting this community. But the thing that they don't realize is the fourth person on the board for that Kilsheimer-Olszewski for-profit with taxpayer-funded money was an individual who runs a not-for-profit, nonprofit company that had been given tens of thousands of dollars. Alan Chernoff.
Never heard of him.
City of Light or something like that, their organization. But Mayor Kilsheimer had directed tens of thousands of dollars in a pocket taxpayer money to this guy, who then happens to be sitting on the board of his new for-profit company that's getting taxpayer money.
So a lot of commingling taking place.
It's a lot of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
You need like a whiteboard and just kind of start drawing all the lines.
Next time we'll be like Glenn Beck
no
up
flag
here.
next time. We're going to have a whiteboard. Let's see what City of Life Foundation. Obviously,
City of Life, yes.
I haven't met Melissa before, but she's obviously very well connected to the situation and following
She's
it.
asking some good questions. And again, this is not symptomatic of Olszewski or Kilsheimer or otherwise. It's a larger commentary on the problem we have in state government with abuse of taxpayer dollars.
I got to tell you that my guess is that this is happening rampantly throughout the state, and it's a sad situation.
We have 67 counties.
Yeah, this is something that never got funded. Imagine all the ones that are funded
that did slip through the cracks.
And they are going through these same situations. But back to my point, after you get past the first few hundred people that take a look at Facebook or even engage on maybe the 30 or 40 that actually engage on social media and talk about this, you have name recognition as probably going to be, and desire to go out and vote in those two elections. Like we said earlier, a special election, people are going to have to want to come out for that reason. So if you like Bobby O, or if you like Paul, I believe his name was Paul, I forgot his name already, the Democrat that's running. If you like any of those individuals, you're going to come out to or sign your your absentee ballot at home. And that brings me back to why I think Bobby O still has a really strong shot here. New Street will basically, and I believe his political consultant might be John Dallas, I'm not quite sure of that, but long story short is he's going to have to spend a lot of that 80,000 he just got just for people to know who he is. His name is easier to pronounce, but the reality of the situation is Bobby has been out there in recent time getting a lot of attention.
No, Bobby, no doubt. This is Bobby's race to lose. If he loses it, it will be from self-inflicted wounds on his campaign. New Street is calling in all of the connections he made, working as a grunt, really, doing good government work and doing that over time, and then he's worked all over the state.
Now, somebody brought to my attention this morning when I was doing some research on this that New Street literally just moved into the district, which is he's following. He can do that.
He's been a taxpayer in the district since 2007.
Okay.
He helped Chip LaMarca down in Broward County get elected to the county commission. Chip is someone who I know from Teenage Republicans when I needed to raise money.
He looks relatively young as well.
Chip's a young guy. New Street's a young guy. So what happened there is New Street helped Chip win and then went to work for Chip and kind of got homesick and came home to District 44 and with the job at the Kissimmee Chamber and working with business owners. So not necessarily, we're not facing a carpetbagger issue there.
Right.
John spent a lot of time in this district, a lot of time in Central Florida beforehand, and had a little 1 or 2 year experience down in South Florida, learning how government works on a county commission level, and otherwise, which I think are good things. And had a job open up at the Kissimmee Chamber and went to work with business owners all over Kissimmee and that area. So I think that's it would be easier to posit New Street as a carpetbagger if he had been not living in Florida or Central Florida for 10 years and his friends called him up and said,
what a carpetbagger is. Not everybody is, I know, Tamala, you don't know what a carpetbagger is. I can tell you Tamala doesn't know. But give everybody a feedback, a place of reference, because all they're hearing is you use that reference. They may not understand.
So somebody, basically coming in and taking advantage of a situation that they have no stake in, no involvement in, I don't know, dates back to probably the 1800s, if I remember correctly. But it kind of describes a prototypical politician. They used it against John McCain when he first ran for Congress or Senate in Arizona, and that didn't work because, of course, he was in prison camp for most of the time. So obviously he hadn't lived in the district for 20 years because he just got home. But with New Street, there is a sense among a lot of people that the service before self mentality, because of his upbringing, because of his experience leading conservative causes and Republican causes in college back when this was not a popular thing.
Sure.
Conservative is the new counterculture.
Sure.
It is cool to be a conservative, and you and I both know it's really cool to be a gay conservative, and we're kind of like
and shocking to many people.
And shocking. we're kind of like leprechauns in that regard. People sometimes think they rub our head and
well, if we can find the pot of gold, that'd be even better.
So with New Street, you see a lot of time spent putting others before himself. This is really the first time he said, you know what? And you have to have a little...
So you would confirm in your feeling he's been recruited to run for this position. Is that a fair assessment?
I think John has been contacted by people within the district who said...
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
If it wasn't on his radar, someone helped put it on his radar.
Sure, I think people helped put it on his radar, but I will also tell you that he was a little bit of a reluctant candidate, saying...
when you run for office, it's like running around without your clothes on all the time. I mean, there's people like you looking for a story.
Of course. And so I think what he experienced was he had a lot of people that he respected, that he has known for a long time, calling him up and saying, John, you got to at least think about this.
Sure.
Not that you have to run, not that we will support you.
I'm sure the first thing they said is, we'll make sure you get funded, and that's happened. I mean...
I think that kind of works backwards, though.
Right.
I think John has spent a lot of time in politics as a volunteer, as a district aide, as someone who works with constituent services, so he's exposed to all these people, he's made all these relationships.
Well, the good news in that is if he becomes the State House representative, it sounds like he has a great framework and foundation for which to grow to do those kind of things. Sure. I do find it curious that Bracy was in that fundraising picture with him. There's got to be a story there, or there's just because I would have thought that would have been one of those, especially knowing what was going on, that Bracy would have said, I'm not sure I should be in this picture.
Well, the same thing that I would urge Commissioner, now candidate, Olszewski to do, I would say the same thing to Senator Bracy. Come clean about the Kilsheimer for-profit business. Tell us exactly how you came about that.
If they come clean, does that mean you stop talking about it? You're not going to write about it? Is that it? Are we done with it? Story's over?
If everyone says how it happened, why it happened, and are honest about it, and they should know that I know from step one to where it is now completely, if they come out and confirm that maybe this was a little bit of a half-baked idea that we should have never let get off the ground, then there's no, it's all over.
I had someone today when I was, again, talking to people about this story that said that I had been, fooled that Bobby was just a big liar, that everything he says here is not the same over here. And I think, as I would look at this as a person that, just a guy with a Facebook page, that's it. I look at it and think, he's got some cleanup work to do on the image. Like it or not, you can sit there, a lot of people think you can just put something behind you, and if you're really good at PR, you can absolutely control your own narrative. There will be people out there, however, that will be helping keep this in the story. This is not going to go away. It's going to go all the way through.
Olszewski is foolish if he doesn't think that there will be a mailer from Porta Legati or Dr. Jane or New Street about his connection to this taxpayer-funded for-profit. And the only way for him to stop that is to come out immediately, denounce and distance himself from that, and also release that letter from all of the people who are currently listed on his website endorsing him, reaffirming their support for him, because it's
and he does have a lot of people.
He has a lot of people, but there's a whisper campaign going on right now where a lot of people are saying, oh, crap, I wish I would have waited, because what's happening with this for-profit thing and the way this race is turning out.
I could be wrong about this, but I believe one of the school board candidates that endorsed him already pulled that endorsement.
I can't confirm or deny that, but I know that a lot of people behind the scenes, even one of his biggest supporters, Dan Webster, is having second thoughts about this, and he needs to just reaffirm that. If it's all crap, if it's all BS, then put out the letter right now and shut me up, shut you up. And, there's no point in the story at that point. But if he doesn't do that, then it's a good indication that there is some dissension among the ranks. And the other thing, that's important is Bobby in his campaign material and everything that he does is talking about transparency, ethics, morals, the best public servant that anyone can be and should be. Well, John Newstreet, without being forced by the state, released his reports early, released the financial reports. The next reports are due after the absentee ballots, military ballots go out. So people can't figure out who's on these reports, who's donating, what you're spending, where it's going to. So
that's a very interesting point.
To confirm that it's service before self and transparency before victory, Olszewski, Portalegati, Usha Jain, Mr. Chandler, everyone should release their reports and follow Newstreet's lead. Newstreet just did it first. And maybe,
I think that's a positive message, but outside of this and your own writing about that, do people even know that? So let's spend a couple of minutes on each one. Let's wrap it up.
Sure.
First of all, we appreciate everybody joining us today. This will probably not be the first or the last time we talk about this race because it is becoming clearly interesting. Just like the City of Orlando District 5 race. The good news is that so many people are paying attention. Mm-hmm. They are curious. It has all the meat of a soap opera. Outside of sex, which that might come down the road, but it's got the sizzle.
Hopefully not. I don't want to think about any of them having sex. I'm sorry.
It's got the sizzle of a show that you might pay attention to, a drama, if you will, because of this whole connection to the mayor of who and he's right. And I've met Joe Klisheimer a few times, and nice guy. He's always been nice to me. However, that's a show right there talking about that mayor of Apopka race, because when you get Brian Nelson coming into that race, who even though there are a few points upside down in that from Republican to Democrat, I do believe that Brian Nelson has a really good shot in that race too.
Nelson is the hometown hero in that,
right.
in that mayor of Apopka race. He's been a business owner, he's been in the community, and Klisheimer is government brought to you by the Orlando Sentinel. He's had some serious issues, and this for-profit thing is one of many.
Yeah, and that's not going to go away from him.
He spent years as a quote-unquote journalist at the Orlando Sentinel, and now we know what Orlando Sentinel-style government gets us.
Yeah, we do. All right, let's just real quickly go through each one. So we've got Paul Chandler, who is the sole Democrat that has qualified for this race. It sounds like he's got a medical background. Probably his goal would be to go up there and possibly, if there was opportunities, focus on healthcare or technology or those different areas.
Entrepreneurialism, business ownership, being someone who makes payroll. Those are all things that Mr. Chandler needs to talk about if he wants to win.
Hasn't raised a lot of money, though, so in order to compete and get his name out there, since, like I said, I had to do a lot of work just to find him, I would probably follow up with Wes at some point, Wes Hodge, the Democratic Party chair, and find out if they're planning to help him raise money. Because my guess is when you see all this other money sitting on the other side, they're going to look at that race just like the Republican Party looked at the Congressional 10 race when Val was running potentially against Twilo, and they just said, we're just not going to, there's no way to win that, so we're not going to put any resources or money behind that.
Unless they have a big mega donor that comes forward and is able to
Hey, that could happen.
It could happen.
Hey, Soros has done other things in this town. So anyway, that's Paul Chandler. Again, I don't have any information to provide you, like his Facebook page or anything other than the stories that I was able to research. So let's jump real quickly to the Republicans. Usha Jain, who is Dr. Usha Jain, who's a former Orange County. She has no money either. I noticed that. But you'd think she'd loan herself some money. She really thought she had that chance.
Money is the mother's milk of politics.
I argue you just have to be in striking distance with the money. You don't have to be the top fundraiser.
You don't have to be the top fundraiser because with social
difference.
media, if you're able to take $60,000, $70,000 of a house campaign, and if you think about it smartly and break down that money into social media ad spends, digital media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, pushing your message that way. Trump did it effectively. He ran on a shoestring budget.
We had a lot of surrogates helping, and we were all out there constantly sending that same message, much like we did when Regina Hill was running first time for city council.
But you said, the numbers, we're looking at, 7,000, 8,000 people voting? And if you're looking at 7,000, 8,000 people voting...
Not a lot. Isn't that scary?
And you target Facebook posts one a day, every day until the election, putting $100 behind it, you're going to reach those people 6, 7, 10 times over, in addition to knocking on the doors. It can be done. But Dr. Jane and Mr. Chandler, that's their, Portalegati, actually the next person that we're talking about, he's put up a video on social media that has close to 10,000 views. It seems,
and it's pretty effective. It's clean. It's professional. Again, I have not met him, but at least when I went to research him, we were able to find out who he was. He's got a. I think if he does,
presence.
He does. If he doesn't have, this is probably not his race. But I would think that somewhere down the line we're going to see him again.
It might be a test, right?
Yeah,
Mr. Portalegati might be testing the waters here, and maybe from this point he runs for congressional or something else. I don't think in his heart of hearts he thinks he's going to win this race, but I think he's giving it the best shot he can to get his name out there, because that's what it's about, name ID.
Yeah, we're going to go to the last two, and at the end I'm going to ask you to make your prediction on who's going to win the primary and who's ultimately going to win in the end. We already know it's going to be probably a Republican. So we got the newcomer, John Newstreet, in here, just got in, raised $80,000. As I understand it, behind the scenes it sounds like it must be Millennial Consulting, or is that John Dallas's, who's may not mean a lot to the folks out there that don't know him, but he's one of the most successful and well organized political consultants in our town. And if John is on your campaign, it's your campaign to lose, in my opinion. And as I said, I made a lot of calls to a lot of folks about John that are elected officials. The ones that did know him, some of them didn't know him either, but the ones that did had only positive things to say about him. We know that Commissioner Scott Boyd, Orange County Commissioner, has come out publicly, knowing he's on his way out. It sounds to me like you don't start doing this kind of activity if you're not. He's probably not. I would say Scott Boyd's not thinking about politics.
Scott Boyd is the suave, dark knight of Orange County politics now. He's not running for re-election. He's not.
And I think he's made it. Yeah, he's going to go to his family business or something. Yeah.
Cool, calm, and collected. I think he's got a little bit of a beard now.
He got a beautiful girlfriend.
Beautiful girlfriend.
Yeah, she's hot.
I mean,
and you heard that from the gay guy.
Yeah. He's a very, in that regard, a very inspiring and engaging guy. I don't agree with him on everything,
right,
but Scott Boyd has swag.
He's just quiet. He's So that's John. So then we've got Bobby Olszewski. And Bobby, as we've recapped earlier, Bobby is a former Winter Garden Commissioner. Bobby left that seat to run for Orange County Commission, got within a few points, very quick, very somewhat heated race, but never publicly to this level that we're seeing now. But does have some challenges as related to some of this negative PR that's coming out with that situation out of Apopka. So thoughts about Bobby?
So Olszewski's path to victory is distancing himself from Kilsheimer and the for-profit taxpayer-funded scheme. The second part of it is to control Evil Bobby. Evil Bobby.
Bobby!
Kind of Bobby over here. We're thinking about, Waterboy with Adam Sandler and Kathy Bates. And remember, we're seeing Henry Winkler on each shoulder. And one of them's God over here and the other one's Satan.
So, but who are those up there? Who are the two?
So these are all Bobby. It's all Bobby. Bobby is just, he needs to put away Evil Bobby. Right. And if he does
he's got to build some bridges and mend some fences.
And build some bridges, mend some fences. That's politics. So if he's able to do those things, he is, whether I like it or not, or other people like it or not, the odds-on favorite. It is his race to lose because he does have considerable name ID in that district.
Absolutely.
So if someone like Portalegati or Newstreet pull this thing off, which I think there's a good chance that Newstreet does, Bobby is really going to have himself to blame.
It would make it tough, I think, for him to run for anything else again.
But
we're a very forgetful and a very forgiving public. We've seen that time and time again. So I'm not ready to suggest that he can't. I just think he does have some PR cleanup work that he needs to do, and probably quicker. And I think he needs to do it privately and publicly.
And if he gets out there tomorrow and says, every single person who has endorsed my campaign in the past is reaffirming their support, from Dan Webster to the smallest person on the list, that is taken away. If he gets out there and says, I was hired to put a business plan together when I found out that they were using taxpayer money for a for-profit, I didn't like it, I don't like it, I don't support it, that's not me as a state representative. Trash.
He can do that on Facebook Live.
He can do it.
I invite
him
to come here, right here, to the studio, and we'll do it we'll absolutely do that.
But despite all those negative things, again, Portalegati, New Street.
You're saying that name so much better than I.
Porta Legati,
it's
right?
not Porta. It's not. He keeps saying it's Porta. It's not Porta. His name is Bruno.
Bruno Porta Legati, though. I don't know if I'm getting that right. He can call
You're
me
close
and tell
enough.
me I'm
You're close.
wrong.
Well, you know that's because we don't know him. Never heard of him, so you never know. I can say Olszewski, and I couldn't say it before. Okay, so just real quickly, folks, we have been talking to you about the Florida State House special election. The reality of the situation was the last time we had a special election in this situation, 9,437 people voted. The incumbent Eric Osnagel, who not the incumbent, but actually the Republican, won that race handedly with about 7,000 of those votes. Sean Raja, who was the Democrat, came in with 2,400, and we'll probably see that same level of percentage and breakdown. That special election, or the actual primary, is going to be in August.
August 15th.
And then the October 10th is going to be the date that we'll actually find out who the new State House representative is for that district. Thank you so much, Jacob, for once again being here.
Randy.
It's always nice to
you,
talk to you and get your perspective on things. And folks, again, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you again soon.